Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our board briefing meeting. We're excited to be here, and we're excited to have a little weather out there. That's part of our business, is to get the weather here. So whoever's in charge of that, good job. We want to excuse a couple people, first off. Let's see, Juliet Tennant is not here right now, the chair. I'm the vice chair, Mike Davis. So I'll be kind of doing this meeting now. So since I'm the new guy, this is a cruel punishment to do this to me. Dana Van Horn is not with us either from the board. So welcome everybody else though. So let's introduce ourselves. Start at that end. Randy, down with you, the board, please.
Randy Crozier, Green River District.
I'm Brian Steed, a new member on this and representing interests of the Great Salt Lake.
Spencer Jones, representing the interests of the Upper Colorado.
I'm Blaine Ipson, representing the Sevier River District.
Kyle Stevens, representing the Weber River District.
I'm Charles Holmgren, representing the Bear River Basin on the northern end of the state.
Mike Davis, Provo River District. And Candace, you can take care of staff and yourself.
Great, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Candace Hostenyeger, Director of Water Resources. We have a full house of staff today and new people that we're going to get to introduce in just a moment. But with us today, we have Shalane DiBernardi, Marisa Egbert, Ben Marett, Ethan Stayner, Rachel Shilton, Olga Ispov, sorry, Olga, Haley Curlin, Craig Miller, and then Daniel Azi, Mahmoud Avik, and Jonathan Jennings, and Michael Sanchez, and Tom Cox, and Stephen McGregorson, and Ani Baynard, and Russell Hadley. I feel like I'm still missing some. Oh, you're way back there, Jake Sarago, and we have Shannon Cloud doing our minutes. Thank you, Shannon. And I saw Randy Staker floating around, but hopefully he's here. And then did I miss anybody? I missed our fearless leader, Joel Ferry. He's here to swear in Mr. Brian Steed. And then, as always, we are so grateful for our folks behind the curtain, Matt Morgan, Seth Majors, and Carmen McDonald running all of our AV stuff. So hopefully I got everyone.
Good job. You did better obviously than I would ever do. We now want to have Director Ferry come up, and glad to have you with us. And this is an important day. We're adding to our ranks.
Thank you. Can you hear? Okay, I'll get closer. Today we have a new board member that we will be swearing in. Exciting times as you continue to do the important work. But before I do that, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. So we are in the thick of a legislative session. We're in week 2 of an exciting time. And as we look forward, I can tell you there's been a lot of attention and focus on the work that you all are doing. And I want to compliment you for the work that you have done. I have personally seen the confidence that has been instilled in the legislature to give a lot of authority to you, a lot of decision making, and a lot of funding. When you look at the funding that this board has received to administer for the state of Utah over the past 2 or 3 years, it not only is it record breaking for us, but it rivals any other agency in the state. And that shows the confidence that the legislature and the governor's office has in you to make those recommendations, and that they continue to have in you. I see us continuing to expand and grow these programs because they are so important. So thank you, first of all, for being very responsible with these precious resources, with the taxpayer dollars, for fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility, and ultimately for being good stewards of the state of Utah. It's critical. So thank you. We are in interesting times, lots of demands for water. And as we make these investments, we are moving the state forward in smart ways, in promoting conservation, in promoting development, smart growth, and ultimately together as we improve the state of Utah, we'll get there together for future generations. So thank you. With that, we have a new member of the board that I'd like to swear in today. So Dr. Brian Steed is representing the new seat that was created last year in what was the bill number? But it was in the Great Salt Lake Commissioner bill. Added 491, that's it. HB 491. And so with that, Brian, if you'll stand and repeat after me. Raise your arm to the square. This is important. And repeat after me. So I state your name. Having been appointed by Governor Spencer J. Cox and confirmed by the Utah State Senate as a member of the Board of Water Resources, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Thank you. And congratulations. Congratulations to newest board member, and thank you again for all the work that you're doing. It's a pleasure to work with all of you and to be hand in hand, arm in arm through these exciting times. So thank you, everybody. Okay.
Thank you, Director Ferry. And welcome, Brian. Glad to have you with our group.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We do have a quick item of some new staff to introduce.
Great.
Candace will take care of.
Thank you, Vice Chair Davis. Excited to always bring new great people onto Water Resources and the great work that we do. So I will call up the managers and have you guys introduce your team. So Rachel Shilton, do you want to introduce Olga and Haley?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, thank you. We appreciate being here today. Where are my folks? Haley Curlin is the newest member of the River Basin Planning Section, and she is going to be focused on helping cities and counties integrate water into their general plans. She is working with a multi-agency team that consists of members from the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Environmental Quality, along with Rick Webster in our section as well. So, thank you, Haley. And Olga Isapov joined us this summer. She is also an environmental scientist, and she is working on a program that's near and dear to your heart. She is tracking the progress of installation of secondary meters with a team within the Division of Water Resources. They will be tracking both the progress of installation and the water savings as those systems start to report their secondary water data. Do you have any questions for these two? Thank you.
And then Craig Miller, do you want to bring up your team? Daniel, Jonathan, and Mahmoud?
Well, good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the board. Today I'm going to introduce some of the newest members of our team. Our newest member is Jonathan Jennings, who comes to us into the cloud seeding program. He ran a cloud seeding business in Texas before he got here. So we're extremely happy to have him, and I think we'll all be amazed at some of the work that he does, including in clearing the air during periods of time when we have our air quality disasters. He thinks he has some ideas on that. So, and then we have Mahmoud Avik is our next newest employee. He comes to us. Well, these two are ABD PhDs. That means all but dissertation. They're just about there. But so Mahmoud comes to us with about 7+ years of experience in engineering, and he is helping us with our programs to identify the inflows to the Great Salt Lake. Believe it or not, we don't really know what really comes into the Great Salt Lake because it's not measured. and also the evaporation off of the wetland ponds and also the lake itself. Both of these individuals are involved in that. And Danielle Aziz comes to us from Alabama, and he has experience that helps us with Great Salt Lake modeling. One of the very few people that we've ever interviewed that has any experience with GoldSim, which is the platform on which it's created. And they've both made some significant contributions in the time that they've been here. So with that, do you have any questions for us?
Craig, I have a question for Jonathan. Does it really snow in Texas?
It certainly does. In fact, we get about 4 inches of snow a year in the western part of the state. But I was there during Snowmageddon 2020 or 2021 in February, where the town of San Angelo got over a foot of snow, and it shut us down for about 2 weeks. So yes, it does.
Well, facing no further questions, we'll be seated. Thank
Thanks,
you very much.
Greg. Thanks, you guys. And that's all, Mr. Vice Chair. We're excited to have our new team members and looking forward to all the great work that they're going to do.
No, that's exciting to get you all on board, and it's too bad we don't have anything for you to do yet, but I'm sure you're loaded up already. All right, next item on the agenda, item 2, a discussion of board agenda items. So we'll dive into that now. If I can get to the right page.
Oh, it's
Oh,
right after this one, right?
oh, right there. I got it. Rookie. Okay. We can discuss the snow report then, or?
Yeah, so we'll do the approval of the minutes. So usually we ask
Oh,
if there's
okay.
any.
Are there any issues we need to address in the minutes from last meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I thought I found an error in the minutes, but I printed them out and I didn't circle where I thought I saw an error, so
So there's none.
maybe when I read it on the computer, it changes when it prints out on hard copy, and seems like I do that frequently around here, but they look good to me.
If there are no changes, we'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
We do that in the main.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't approve any.
We don't approve anything in this meeting.
But usually you'll find someone to make the motion.
Is there someone willing to make that motion? Thank you.
Okay. And then the snow report, that's just informational.
Okay. Looks like feasibility reports then.
Yep. So we'll call up Russell.
So Russell, if you can come up and bring us up to speed on this one.
Hello, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. I think we're just doing a brief summary of reports at this point. So, Hyrum Blacksmith Fork Irrigation Company wants to replace their diversion structure that's badly deteriorated, the head gates with it, and about 2,200 feet of pipe in their system. They've got some concerns about these canals on hillsides failing and damaging property, and just want to take care of it before something happens. Also, a lot of maintenance problems, a lot of bush and trees they need to clear out, and a lot of seepage loss. Projects expect to cost $460,000, and staff recommends 15 years repayment at 0% interest, with payments of $15,200 approximately. That is staff's report. Any questions?
How are they just financing their repayment off of share prices or
Yes.
assessments? I mean,
Yes, they're planning on raising their assessments, whatever they need to.
that seemed reasonable for their company.
Yes, they're okay with it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Russell?
I have just a question, looking at the map as a part of the presentation, noticed that there's a large section there with identified as existing earthen ditch.
Yes,
Is that still in good working order? Will that be something that they will be coming in the future to potentially pipe or?
Yes, they just didn't want to take off too much on this project. They figure with the diversion and a lot of this clearing and grubbing they're gonna have to do, be in a lot of people's backyards. They want to take care of the most dangerous areas in their opinions first, the areas they're most concerned about. And yeah, they will be doing that other earthen section. In fact, there's a photo I'm gonna show you of why they just don't want to deal with it right now. It's in people's backyards and it's a lot of hassle.
Okay.
So do they have this ag optimization grant in hand? Have they just applied for it, or have they been approved?
No, it is approved, and it's that odd number you see there, $191,750 exactly.
Mr. Chairman, I met with Russell and the irrigation group along with Ethan and Brad, and it's a mess. and houses encroaching around it and stuff, and holy cow, they need some help. It did take us a few minutes to find Mr. Peterson's home in Nibley. He was back in the backwoods there a little bit, but we finally made it there.
They're gonna create a lot of firewood after they finish this, don't you think?
Okay.
A lot of clearing and grubbing, huge trees.
Yes, Russell. It's a forest or a jungle. I don't know which way to
It
describe it.
is, it's a mess.
Randy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question on the water optimization. I understood it was a 10% minimum from the Canal company. Am I just,
No, oh boy, that's a strange percentage they have there. They did it a little different on this one. It was
Okay.
something like, the grant is for 48%, and then their share is 52%. So,
Okay.
yeah,
I just-
no 10% that I'd.
I just
Heard of in
didn't
this
know, what I'd understood was a minimum 10% on those, and so I just didn't understand the percentage there.
Yeah, it was a little different this time.
Okay.
Brian's got a question too.
Oh, Brian?
So as the new guy, sorry, just by way of information.
You don't have to apologize to have a question here. I learned that.
Well, I'm sorry for asking. So, is it standard practice, 15 years, 0% interest?
That is the minimum amount of years that the board will allow.
Okay.
Just because the benefits on this, we could see it being the minimum.
Okay.
They could be able to pay it in 15 years.
And just so I understand, the ag optimization project, what's it intended to do?
No, that's just a grant.
Okay, but it's for something? What is the intent on that?
It's for this project, correct?
Yes, it's
Okay.
for this project, all of it, unlimited. They can use it for the pipeline or the diversion.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may. In addition to that, what Russell indicated, because this is coming from the revolving construction fund and it's under $1 million, the board can do a 0% interest.
And it is agriculture.
Right, sure.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Russell, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to have the opportunity to make the motion in general meeting.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next up, we have the Liberty Pipeline Company project. Ann?
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. Just to remind you about this project, they're going to build a booster pump station and a transmission pipeline, as well as a meeting house that will have their SCADA system. And the reason for this is to make their system more drought resilient. They're going to connect the north and south zones. The cost estimate and sharing remain as reauthorized, and the staff recommends the board commit 27.2% of the project cost up to $1 million. and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 20 years with annual payments of $50,000. So pretty straightforward.
Okay, any questions?
Not a question, just a comment. You'll recall that this is one that has gone through 2 or 3 iterations of finalization, because the first report that was, that came to us, the first feasibility report, I think they went back and determined that they were not able to fund that amount or to repay that amount.
Yeah, they felt like it was a little too expensive for them, so they were going to replace their existing distribution line, and they took that out of their project to bring costs down.
So they scaled it back, and,
Yeah.
and glad that they're at this point being able to move forward. I did have the opportunity to meet with, I think it was Tom. We went up and met, well, and Ann. That was when you were first came on board with the assignment, and met with them. But so glad to see that it's moving forward, and I'll be prepared to make the motion.
Thank you, Kyle. Any other questions on this project? Thank you, Ann. Okay, on to special items. We have the Consolidated Sevier Bridge. Tom, can you get us up to speed on this one?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Consolidated Sevier Bridge Reservoir Company owns and operates Sevier Bridge Dam, which you probably know more commonly as Yuba. So you've kind of heard about that over the last year or so, because you say that all the reservoir storage in the state is great except for Yuba. And that's partly because of construction, but not really. It's just a very large reservoir, and it doesn't fill and spill very often. But this is a dam safety upgrade project that started, well, actually phase 1 was completed in 2004. And then last year, they were ready to, and we had funding for phase 2, which was to replace the spillway, add an additional auxiliary spillway, do some foundation improvement, stability berm, and some drains. So that work is finishing up, and as we kind of calculate the projected final cost of the project, it's looking like it'll be about $1 million more. So the board committed funds on a project of 26 million cost estimate. Now it's bumped up to 27 million. And so the company will be requesting today another $900,000 of dam safety grant. The company will be providing some donated materials, so they won't need to ask for any additional loan money today. It'll just be grant money. So the main reason the project cost went up is that auxiliary spillway, it's kind of off by itself, so they knew they had to do something there, but they were concentrating on doing the work on the main embankment, so that final design and cost estimate wasn't really put together till towards the end of the project, so that had to adjust the cost for that. And we're giving the company credit for some of the donated materials, and there have been a few change orders throughout the projects. So the staff is recommending that the board commit an additional $900,000 in dam safety grant and amend the contract to provide 90% of the project cost up to $24,300,000. Any questions on that one?
Mr. Chair, on this, I have spent a fair amount of time up there, and it's an impressive project. Ames Construction's been the contractor, and they've done a great job. As Tom indicated, they're on the final leg, we hope, of this project. And I've been really impressed with the quality of the construction on that. It's an impressive project, and I know that the board has seen it a few years ago. It's a significant upgrade where it is. And I am a stockholder in 4 out of those 5 companies. And so normally, anything in my area, I would make the motion, but I'm going to need to recluse myself from making a motion or voting on this. I've talked to Spencer. He said he's willing to make a motion on this.
You good, Spencer, with doing that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment to Tom and to Blaine. When the board did their tour in the Sevier River Basin, I believe we looked at that quite a bit. And just remind me, is this supplemental spillway or additional spillway the one that will drain past the freeway exit or close to the freeway exit on the northern, up north a ways?
Yes, it's to the north, and it's where the state park entrance is over there.
Okay.
There's a low spot. It's the lowest spot of the whole thing, and they had to armor that up pretty good. There's a natural drain wash that goes down there. And heaven forbid the day that water starts going through that, because it may take the freeway.
Well, I just remember seeing that on the tour, and when this project was discussed, at least this time or previously, I was thinking of that specific spot. So, thank you.
And as far as the name Yuba, actually, it's spelled Y-U-B-A. It's common slang name, but it used to be spelled Y-O-U-B-E, U-B. And where that came from is when they first started construction on this dam in 1902, the Deseret Irrigation Company was the only owner at the time. And the stockholders couldn't afford to have a contractor, so they started initial construction. And if you owned whatever shares in stock, you were assessed so many hours working on the dam. And so, and then they would pay you back with more shares of stock, at which time then you owed more hours on the dam. And so that's the way they initially financed a good part of it. This is the largest privately owned reservoir capacity in the state, UB is. And where the name UB came from, they had a song that the Deseret stockholders sang as they worked on the dam. And the song went basically that you be danged. I don't say that other word unless I slip sometimes. You be danged if you do and danged if you don't. Because the more you worked on the dam, the more stock you were given, and then you had to work that much more. So it was a kind of like a endless little circle. But that's a little bit of its colorful history. But this dam was originally built in 1902. It was enlarged in 1916. And then as Tom indicated, in 2004, they did the upstream stability and put in a new outlet tunnel. And then phase 2 is this last one. And they have done a lot of work. And like I say, I've been up there several times. It's impressive. The contractor's done a great job, so.
Well, not to dig too deep, but how much work did you have to do on that back then?
Zero. see these gray hairs?
Mr. Chairman, I now that Blaine's gone there, I have to tell my little experience with Yuba. And in 1973, the Utah Army National Guard 1457th Engineers were doing some work around the reservoir, and I wasn't part of that. I was with an artillery unit, but we were enemy aggressors for their Army training test in 1973. And that reservoir was clear full that summer, let me tell you. And the only place we had to bathe was in Yuba Reservoir. So that was my bathtub in 1973. And
Still considered contaminated?
yeah, it is. But I remember we were down there the first 2 weeks of June, and I'm not sure it did not snow on us while we were down there in 1973. I thought I was going to freeze to death down there.
Well, I love it when I learn new things. Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Tom. All right, the next item for discussion is the Huntsville South Bench Canal Company withdrawal. Ben,
And
Ethan, or
Mr. Vice Chair, while Ben's, I don't know if Ben needs to come up, I just want to go back. So we, from the board, has asked us to go back through our records and clean up the projects that have been on there for a long time, but there's no intention of coming back to the board. They were authorized a long time ago. And so this is that effort with the next three. And I did check in with Shalane. The board can make one motion to have them all withdrawn at once.
okay.
Do we want reports on those from staff? No, okay. So unless you would like to
Okay.
hear more about them, they're here and happy to come up. But just generally, this is, the effort to go through and clean up the board's records.
We will need someone to make the motion for the three items. Is there someone willing to? Randy, thank you. Okay, moving on then. New applications, King Irrigation Company. Ethan, do you want to? Oh, that's just information? Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing presented today. It's just information to the board that we did have a new application come in.
Mr. Chairman, Ethan and Tom and Brad and I met with these folks just barely, what was it, a week ago? And so it's just.
So it's just in the starting phase?
In the starting phase, yes, sir.
Okay. So do we have anything on the general planning?
So every board meeting, it's been ongoing for over a couple of years. We try to have a planning report on there for you, so you are kind of getting the breadth of the office and all the different things that we work on. So this is just an informational item to the board on our efforts to integrate water into the general plan. So Rick Webster will be here during the board meeting to present that item. And then the next item, the Bear River Development right-of-way updates. We do have a supplemental page to your board report. And Marisa, did you want to say anything? Okay. Sorry to jump ahead on you.
Nope, you're good. This is great.
I'm going to see if I can switch out. Carmen thinks I can without blowing things up back there. You should see all the wires back there. It's very cool. So I'm going to try to, while I do this, just kind of talk. And Mr. Vice Chair, we had an idea, months ago that you would be having to do this as a rookie. And so we planned ahead to make this kind of challenging for you. So just wanted you to know that.
I assumed as much, yes, thank you.
Okay. It's not coming up yet. It's thinking about it. We're so expecting technology, but I can also do a share, and I can happy to do that. But Seth's coming. See, we also wanted to show Seth because, they're back and hidden. So.
It is too. Sometimes these
Oh,
are.
sorry about that.
Okay, we're gonna do this.
And I like to keep them on their toes back there.
Oh,
If
yeah,
they're sitting too long, want them to be able to move about. But I can start talking. Ooh. Should I just do a share on the Google Meet? Here it comes. Yeah, try sharing Google Meet. I will. Okay. Because I kind of know how to do that. And then my mine's going blank. There we go. All right. I'm gonna start with this one. Oh, don't go blank. Why is it doing that? Because I need to unplug. Okay, I'm gonna unplug this. Because does that show up?
Yes, we're going to
It
plumb that through.
is actually. So Candace is lying to me. She's, yes. And actually I can see it here in threefold. So, yeah. So I just want to kind of back up a little bit. This has been going on for a while and some of you are fairly new. But I do want to show this. So Bear River development, even though we're in the planning stages, even though, you know, we're looking at decades out, and as my kids finally started questioning me, Mom, will you even be alive when this is built? And I said, I don't know. Don't know if I want to live in Utah if we need that much water at that point. But because they know that this has continued to be pushed out, the need for it continues to be pushed out as the water districts go to great strides and spend a lot of money on trying to find other ways to save. The big one right now, secondary metering, is fantastic for Weber County Water Conservancy District. Did I say that right? Weber Basin. Thank you. My brain is just gone. But want to give you an idea. We've got you know, 2-scale picture of Brian Steed inside of that pipe there. We're looking at a large diameter pipeline. This is why we're concerned about trying to acquire some right-of-way now. This is our biggest concern, is that for a large diameter pipeline that gets buried very deep, if you want to have open trench, which is cheaper, perspective cheap, cheaper, we are looking to get 100 feet of right-of-way. We can squeeze in and shore it up and have equipment on one side with, I can't remember if that says 70, we can squeeze in, but we are trying to get 100 feet of right-of-way. So I'm going to switch now. I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to start sharing. See how I just share? I'm going to share something else. All right. I like it. See, I'm sharing. This is like The Incredibles 2. I'm now going to take
Members,
over
I'm
the
worried
world.
that we may want to look away before we get hypnotized here.
Okay, let's see. Let's make sure this will work. Oops. Okay. So, this is not to scale. This is not to scale. There's a great comic named, I can't think of his name, Steven something, and he said he really wants a map of the world, actual size. So this is not, but if you look at this, that's Willard Bay. This is going north. It's really hard to find 100 feet in there. And so, and when we say 100 feet, everyone's like 10-foot diameter pipeline. Why? For the construction purposes. And if some of you are familiar with Marett Canal enclosure, and I'm trying not to say lies, they chose to do the pipe at location because, again, if you have say you have a 10-foot diameter pipe, even a 9-foot diameter pipe, and you drive in your car today, as you drive under an underpass and you see the height of that, try to imagine putting a pipe on top of that, and maybe it's only 20 feet long and you've got miles to go. And as I learned from Nate Bargatze on Saturday Night Live about a month ago, a mile is 5,280 feet, a very simple number for our country to remember. So that's a lot of trucks. Sorry, I'll get you that link. It is clean. So what's been going on over this time is we've been very concerned about this area around Willard Bay. We've looked west of Willard as far as not right-of-way, but construction, and it's an environmental nightmare and it's an engineering nightmare. And so we talked about US 89, and UDOT laughed at us pretty hard about 10 years ago, then we let them laugh for a while, and then they started looking mad at us, so we stopped talking. And again, when you're trying to project this far out, how do you project what's going to happen? And we already know that US 89 is really starting to fill up. The other option was to try to squeeze in over here or squeeze through the towns, and we don't like that either. We'll be a dead end in the ground for a lot of it. So over here, so we've got Willard Bay, we've got I-15, we've got the railroad, and then Frontrunner UTA is purchasing right-of-way. So we partnered with Frontrunner several years ago because we don't have a right-of-way group at Water Resources. It became me and Candace pretty much, and so kind of still is. But we added Wendy Crowther, the AG. So they kind of are a real estate agent. We've been working with them. And with the idea that we would go just east of them. So the idea is if there's going to be a dead end in the community, let's pile it together. So we have started purchasing some of this. We now, we own a cherry farm. Candace. I like to throw her name out there. We leased it back. So we purchased a strip and then are leasing it back to them. So there's cherry farm, peach farm. We've got these 4 fields in through here. And the idea is we wanted to miss these neighborhoods. We've got to come from West Haven, which is on the west side. We've got to cross I-15. And so we know we want to cross somewhere in this area, and that's where our initial thing happened. But then we got involved with UTA, and they're like, well, we're going to be over here. We need some houses, backyards of houses. And so unfortunately, letters got sent out saying that Water Resources was buying houses. So we bought some houses. And we've got some houses in here. UTA's changed their right-of-way. They don't need any of the backyards anymore. And our concern is right now, we bought the houses. The sellers lived in them for a long time. Well, a couple years while they built houses, they've moved out. We now have 3 vacant homes. Brad Caldwell and Ethan Stayner are well versed with them as they go up at least every week and make sure that no pipes have burst. Granted, we've emptied the water out. We've emptied the pipes and the water heaters at this point. Sorry. We do have one house. Sorry, I know I'm kind of going into this, but I just kind of want to catch up the context. We do have a house. You know, they called and said, oh, you're buying houses. And we're like, oh, well, not necessarily. But so we have a house up in here in this neighborhood. We will need the backyard one day because Willard Bay is right there. So we did purchase the home. I started mowing the lawn with my personal mower. And then I went over to State Parks and I said, you guys got to have bigger mowers than me. And then they said, why do you have a house? I said, I don't want a house. And they said, well, we want a house. And I said, we'll buy it. And they said, we can't. And I said, well, can you move in? And so they've moved in. So what we're looking at right now, then State Parks heard we might want to sell these other 3 homes that are further south, because the ones further south, they're not in the critical path that we envision. They said we might want to buy those. So we had discussions for a while. And the screaming deal we thought we had wasn't quite screaming enough. And they said, we just don't have the budget to buy those homes. But then I caught interim director Scott Strong at a legislative session. And I said, hey, those homes. He goes, yeah, we can't buy them. I go, I know. You want to move in? I said, they're empty, they're vacant, and we're worried about the neighborhood. We're worried about the neighbors worrying about them. We're worried about the upkeep. And his eyes just lit up. The idea is that they've got staff that can move in. So, and I know the board, when we talked about this and trying to sell these homes, one concern was the state owns property. Do we really want to sell property? I will tell you from a standpoint, again, trying to project 30 years out, I don't know that will end up being the path because there's so many homes on that side of the right of I-15, and we're trying to avoid that. And we've got a better path on the west side. But again, I'm trying to project out. There's 3 homes. One of them is in really bad shape. It's going to cost us some money to remediate. That one, Candace and I have talked about it. Not only we would remediate, it would then have to be remodeled. A lot of the inside. Our thought is to do the remediation, but then sell it on the open market as is. The other 2 are only a few years old. They are very much conducive to having a family upstairs and a family downstairs, and they're right next to each other. So those are the 2 that I talked to Director Strong about them moving in. The other house not only is in really bad shape, it's older, electrical, it's a lot of issues with it, and it would only fit 1 family. So that's the context that we're coming into this. Again, we're keeping this house up here because we feel it's important to keep that. Parks is in it. You know, the other 2 homes, it looks like Director Strong is going to move in there. We've got to sit down with him and talk to him about it. They would pay for all the maintenance management, roofs, water heaters, whatever needs to be put in and whatever needs to be replaced over time, you know, taking care of the yard. The other house, we're gonna recommend, remediating it, so we're not selling it on the market with the issues it has, but not doing any remodeling and fixing up, selling it as is. So that's the bigger context I wanted to make sure you all have, before we talk about it and go to a motion in the board meeting. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, is State Parks leasing it from us?
Yes.
Are the terms favorable?
For both of us, yes.
Okay.
We're not maintaining that house, that one house. I drove by it and just saw that there was now Halloween decorations, and I was really excited to see someone was in there, and I'm not mowing the lawn. So, yeah.
So if I might, Mr. Chair, so we are leasing the house pretty much at no cost other than they're maintaining the properties.
Which saves us money.
The board, you know, still owns the property. We just don't have to maintain it or pay someone to maintain it.
Okay.
We were paying utilities,
Sure.
even though no one's in there, and
Seems like a win-win.
yeah.
Do we pay property taxes?
No, we went through a thing with Box Elder County, and because it's state, we're exempt on that.
What about insurance?
That is covered, I believe, through risk management with state properties. Yeah, we pay. Great question. So I'm glad you brought that up. We'll have to talk to Jim Egbert about that. I believe what we did with the other home that they're already in is they are paying to risk management whatever needs to be paid for that. I get a little lost in that. So I will check with Jim Egbert on that, how that's happening. But our idea is that they get to live in it and just pay for everything and maintain it and keep it up as they need. And, you know, hopefully they live in it for a very long time.
A question on the home that you talk about needing remediation. Will that require additional funds from the board, or will that come out of the existing set-aside? As I
Yeah, which
recall, there
fund?
was some money set aside, you know, for that, for those acquisitions,
Yeah.
and there should be a balance left in that. So
Oh,
where
yeah.
will the money come from?
Yeah, the board authorized, was it 4 or 5 years, 5 years ago, $5 million for us to go pursue right of way. We've used about roughly half of it, and so it would come out of that.
Yeah. And I don't know exactly which fund, because I don't know where the utilities that we pay for come out of exactly. I was looking around for Randy real quick, because Randy reimburses or pays those bills.
And then when it's sold, will that money go back into that fund then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll have some money coming back. So, and we do have we've gotten appraisals in the last few months. All of the houses did go up in value, and so we do. I don't have those numbers right now. I could quickly look them up though, but there is an increase in value. However, we're going to remediate it, and the appraisal was done with the knowledge of the work that needed to be done in there. So, and DFCM, Department of Facilities and Construction Management, has been helping us facilitate a lot of this, and they've been great. But it's getting to where they can't do much. It's running them thin a little bit. So,
Any further questions?
Just, Mr. Chairman, I would be willing to make the motion on this agenda item if you'd like me to.
Thank you, yes, that would be great.
and I got word this morning that the cost for the remediation we got about 6 months ago hasn't changed, and it'll take about 2 weeks to do so, and then our real estate agent at DFCM said we could get it on the market probably for spring, which would be nice for the neighborhood. We have had yard work done and such. When Ethan and Brad started going up and checking on it, the neighbors were ready to call the cops on them. And I did get a call from the sheriff's office wanting to know, but it was out of concern. So I'm grateful to the neighbors about being concerned. Is there someone trying to get in, or is it someone taking care of it? I think you're known now, right? Have you been invited to the neighborhood parties yet? Not yet. Well, that maybe in summer. Yeah. So, so I appreciate the neighborhood doing that. I also know if I lived in a neighborhood with an empty house that long, I'd get a little tired of it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stop sharing now. Appreciate that.
All right. The next part is the director's report, which apparently we're not.
I'll just cover some highlights for you guys in the
Excellent.
board meeting, so I'll save that for later.
That's the catcher, so you tune back in for the other meeting.
That's right.
Okay, so that covers everything there. Then on the proposed agenda, back to the briefing. We do have information to the board number 3, so we'll go to that point.
Great, thank you so much. Our first item is the status of funds, Shalane. And then there's also, she'll mention a project that you guys are familiar with, Deer Creek, that is probably looking for some additional funds as well. So we'll discuss that at that point too.
Good morning, board. And I must say, if our new board member wasn't so busy all the time, we would have had a few minutes to get together and chat about some of those basics on the funds. But just a reminder, since I am jumping into the status of funds, I'll remind you all, the revolving construction fund is only for projects where the board's share is $1 million or less, and there is no interest charged from the revolving construction fund. It cannot be used for municipalities, but only for domestic water companies or water users associations, irrigation companies, small projects, $1 million or less. The city's water loan fund is only for municipalities. Interest rates range can be 0, but also go up to whatever 75% of the revenue bond index is at the beginning of each quarter. Currently, it's 2.66% is what the board's rate would be for the highest. And C&D funds, we must charge interest, something, typically 1% for ag projects. It's anything over $1 million for just about anyone that falls within the board's guidelines of what they will fund. We'll talk some more about that later. And again, up to that 2.66% for municipal projects. Industrial projects get their own special rate of 7%, which I think is why we haven't seen one for quite some time. It's kind of fun to be here in a meeting that's more like what we used to see on a regular basis. A feasibility, a committal of funds, one amendment, a few withdrawals. This is kind of nice for a change. But in the status of funds, you'll notice there hasn't been a whole lot of change if you compared it to December. You might not even notice. I just pulled up December's on my computer to compare it to the one in your hands. I was like, why is the revolving fund really close but slightly different? Of course, we're asking you to withdraw one that's about $224,000 and asking you to authorize one that's $228,000. So we're kind of replacing one with the other, which is kind of nice. So the regular revolving fund isn't changing very much at all right now. The dam safety funds are part of the revolving, so that additional $900,000 being asked for today will reduce the amount available there. And I just want you to be aware, even though there aren't projects listed on here, Tom and Ben are working. I believe there are investigations underway so that we'll be bringing you projects in the near future for this $19 million that's available. We already know where it needs to go, We just haven't had the chance to bring it to you yet. The city's water loan fund, I was a little disappointed. I have to say, I got all excited last time, told you I took off Millville City for that almost 1.6 million, and then I couldn't find the withdrawal report. So I don't know that it's been officially withdrawn, so I put it back on. We'll keep working on this cleanup that Director Hassenjager mentioned before. There's a lot more still on my records that I think could really help us with some of our balances if we could get them withdrawn. But we do still have some funds available, even with the Hurricane City project that was authorized at the last meeting. And then the C&D fund, where all the fun is happening. A lot of it to go along with the secondary meter grants. This is, if they need a loan, this is where it's coming from. So you'll see we got I think one more project contracted. Not a whole lot of change. The holidays, I guess things kind of slowed down for everybody, which is not too bad. But we do still have some funds available in the C&D, just not the balance that we sometimes are carrying. I'll highlight the secondary meter grants. There hasn't been much change there. As you know, the ARPA funds have all been authorized and or committed at this point, so there really isn't more to bring you at this point. However, there are some who are looking for exemptions and may be returning their funds. And as you may be aware, there's currently legislation to discuss possible changes, so there might be even more that we then have to figure out if we're going, what's coming back and how we get it out. So did you want to jump in about that now?
We'll discuss it in a little bit. We're going to have a legislative preview, but specifically legislation changing the exemptions and who can be exempt. So potentially the ramification is more might be eligible for exemptions, and if the board has already authorized money, then they may turn it back, and so we may have a chunk of money that we got to go figure out what to do with, or there's also legislation that could say that expand the exemption, those that are exempt to use the money for another purpose, as long as the board authorizes it. But we can get more into it.
Yeah, just wanted to mention that a little bit here. But so the status of ARPA funds hasn't changed much because all the funds have been authorized and committed as far as you're concerned. We're just waiting to clean up those that, if they're exempt, if they can convert the funds or if they'll be returning the funds, all or part. Hopefully we'll have some more information specifically to present to you in March. On that note, you will see the last page of the future funding needs does include that one new application. They're expecting to ask the board for $960,000. It is an ag project, so we could fund that from the revolving fund at 0%. There was mention as I was coming up about Deer Creek. I'm sure you all recall the Deer Creek intake project. Some of you may not be aware, but this board has committed $65 million towards their $100 million project. They are $11 million short of the total funding needed to pay for the project at this point. They have asked for that from the legislature a couple of times. I don't know if they've been instructed, but I think they're done asking the legislature. The legislature told them no. And so they've mentioned to us on staff that they'd like to come back and ask the board for additional funds. I have told Tom, it's Tom's project, I've told Tom I'm not really comfortable with that right now. First of all, they're not at the point of needing it. I mean, they'd like to know it was committed, but this is a multi-year project. Of the board's funds, they've only spent, I believe it was 28 million of the 65 you've committed. So this is several years it's going to take them to get to construction. So my point was, yeah, 100 million is the cost estimate, but I would much rather come to the board for additional funds when, one, we know we have it, and two, when we know what they really need. Not, well, we're still 2-3 years out, but we think we need $11 million more. The other option they have right now is they do have the availability to ask for federal loan funds. Of course, federal funds just come with a lot more hoops to jump through, a lot more requirements that they would have to meet, which would drive the cost of the total project up. So they would rather not do that if they don't have to. But we figured we'd bring this to you today, let you know this is hanging out there, and let you discuss it, see what your thoughts are on this issue.
So it's a long enough project, I'm assuming here, but I don't know, and I'm asking. Did they go back through and look at potential savings pertaining to this $11 million, or are they just going off their projections and saying, yeah, we're short and we need to ask for it?
They've been doing this one a little bit different. It's a CMGC.
Okay.
So it's not a bid. They've been working with the contractor all along, and his maximum bid puts him at the top of about $100 million with the engineering. So hopefully it won't change much, but I guess there is a possibility. And
Have they already used up their contingency throughout the plan then, or is that not considered?
I think there's still some contingency in there, but it's probably pretty much committed. The project is scheduled to be completed by the spring of 2026, so there is a little bit of time, but it will take them some time to work through the federal process if they need to get the additional funds.
Oh, go ahead, Brad.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So what is the remainder of their capital stack? I mean, it's a $100 million project. We've given 65. They're 11 million shy. What's the rest of their funding sources?
They're getting 17% from Central Utah, so that's 17 million, because they have an operating agreement with Central on the Central Utah project, and they're coming up with 7 million on their own.
Okay. Is it possible for them to go back and make up that additional 11 million in addition to the 7 million on their own?
The Murdoch Canal Enclosure Project was mentioned, and they received quite a chunk of money from us, so they recapitalized on a bond. So they created a bond to pay our portion of that off plus 7 million. So they think they're pretty stretched with that. But I guess there's a possibility of them maybe coming up with a portion of the 11 million. I mean, I don't think it's 11 million or nothing that they could be asking for.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, any other questions for Tom? I think this is something I'll have more questions about in the future, I think, as we discuss this and looking at that burden potentially going all onto us doesn't quite fit for me. That there probably ought to be, there's other participants in this, and what additional are they going to put in? I mean, there's all kinds of questions like that, I think, that'll need to be explored.
At one point, they had applied to the Drinking Water Board, but then when they got our 65 million, and they were still trying to get money from the legislature, they withdrew that application. But I'm hearing that drinking water isn't flush with money at this time either, so it may be a matter of going to the feds or coming up with some on their own.
Yeah.
We can definitely have a discussion, and we'll involve you with the association and see how things stand.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, you'll be very involved since this is your area.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I certainly, I'm new here, but I certainly, I'm incredibly conservative
right.
financially, and I just want to look at all the potentials to see where we need to share this blessing.
Right. Well, and I think what would also be helpful, because you are new here, and maybe even to more board members, even though it's not their area, is to look at the original project report when this was presented to the board, just to understand the scope of how much of the state's water goes through that intake structure. Because it is significant. So it is a significant benefit. This project is a significant benefit, not just to Utah County folks, but a large number of Utah's population. But I'm not completely comfortable with the board providing them another 11 million myself. So this is something I think we do need to discuss. I think if they want to request it, they're going to have to submit a formal request to the board that will come to you because you're their board member, and then possibly be presented to the board as a
So
whole.
you mentioned they did go to the legislature a couple of times, perhaps.
I believe so.
Was anything ever said, or did they just say go back to Board of Water Resources?
And Candace can probably answer this more, but I think it was more, they made their presentation and a request for appropriation, which was, I don't know if it was outright rejected or just ignored.
Just ignore, okay.
It wasn't prioritized, so an RFA request for an appropriation was made, and it was not prioritized. Then last year, that was 2 years ago, they may have run RFAs the last 2 years, but then last year, the legislature appropriated $50 million in grants or loans to GOEO, so the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. And so they ran an application period, and I know that Provo River water users applied, once again, for this shortfall. And once again, their project was not prioritized through that process either. So they've tried a few different avenues to get grant funds for that $11 million.
Just
Randy, go ahead. Sorry.
Just a comment, I know, this project's extremely difficult because they're doing it underwater, which adds to the cost immensely, and the ability to drain that reservoir to do the repair just isn't available. So we know it's very complicated, and, regardless of the cost, the project's going to have to be completed. It's just a matter of how do we fit in the mix to make it all work. But, in reality, the project's going to get done. It's just how you're going to fund it.
And I agree with that. I'm wondering how deep have they gone to find other funding? Are we the only potential source? I don't think we are, but maybe we're the best one in the long run. I don't know.
Well, and I shouldn't say it, but if we have a little drier winter, it may allow the levels to pull down a little bit more, which may make it a little less costly to do some of it too. But
it's pretty full now, though.
Oh, I know it is.
They purposely have kept the level up.
And I beat up on Keith pretty hard about they're not willing to pull it down to do some stuff too. Yeah. And so I think there could be a few things done by some cooperation that could help the situation as well. So, but it's hard to run the project when you're not at the wheel. Anyway, just comment.
Oh, it's easy when it's armchair running. Everything's easy then.
Well,
not realistic, but easy.
As I did those high mountain lakes and helicoptered everything and stuff over the years, you can make a lot of difference if you're willing to do the hard work sometimes. And so sometimes you have to fight some battles, and I'm not sure that people are willing to quite fight the battle to make it work. So anyway.
Okay, thank you. I guess, is that,
So just to clarify, Mr. Vice Chair, the board is, we don't obviously need a motion, but is okay with our approach to kind of let the project proceed, and then as we know more, come back, make sure there is, and through that official kind of ask, would that be a new application, or what would that look like?
No, because they have an existing project. Now, this is where it gets interesting. For them, they can't amend it because it's a bond. So they would have to issue a new bond if there were additional funding provided, no matter what. But because it's an existing project with the board, they could do like any other and submit a letter, an email through the board members saying, we'd like to request additional funds, have staff meet with them, consider that, go through the numbers, bring it to the board for discussion and a decision. I just wanted to see if there was maybe some agreement with my assessment that I don't think that's something I want to see right now. An official request. If they want to submit it, they can. I don't think our C&D fund right now is in a place where I'd feel comfortable saying, sure, we've got another $11 million we can offer to someone, and they don't need it right now. I mean, I know they'd like to have that security moving forward because, as everyone stated, it is under construction. I hear it is cool. I haven't been to see the barge on the lake yet, but I hear it's pretty cool to see. But I don't know that I'm comfortable as staff bringing it to the board at this point. But if they want to submit an official request, they can do that whenever they want to. But it would be a letter or email through Mike as representative of their area. And then Tom would proceed with creating a report to bring to the board.
for me personally, I agree with your assessment, but that's up to the board to a large degree.
I'm in support of that as well. It'd be nice to be able to see if there's some efforts that can be made for some other possible funding out there.
Thanks for that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and board members, for your weighing in on that. Another item, we have a couple other items. One is a board discussion on an application for a potential project. Shalane.
Yes, Tom and I will just sit here
You
and
just stay there.
continue. So this is the one we brought to you last briefing meeting, just asking for your opinion for Wallace's Peak Water Company. Had submitted an application for a project. They estimate the project is about $10 million to construct a dam. And while we accepted the application, we just really weren't sure what to do with it. And the board said, why don't we get an attorney's opinion about this? So we did, and I'd like to share that with you.
Will you give a quick background on the application so
Yes.
board members?
So Wallace's Peak Water Company is a company made up of a grown man and his two sons. That's all it is. So three shareholders in the LLC.
It's not really even shares, it's a partnership. And so there's no formal shares. They just pay things on a kind of a percentage of costs.
But, so it's a company, but they're a family. And so the reason we brought it to you last briefing meeting is because the board's guidelines do state that the board will not fund projects sponsored by families. But this application was in the name of a company. So when you asked for the attorney's opinion, we sent the board's guidelines and we sent the application along with the cost estimate to our attorney. And AG Liz Harris, this is what she had to say. And I'd just like to read if that's okay with you, what she had to say. She said she had looked through the information I provided. Here are my general thoughts. First, based on my reading of the statutes and rules, the board has been given broad discretion to decide which projects it wishes to fund. Under Utah Code 73-1-26-6, the board may fund a project for a wide variety of groups, including incorporated groups, so long as it determines that the proposed project is in the best interest of the state and public. I looked up the corporate filings for Wallace's Peak Water Company and confirmed that it is registered LLC in good standing, so it technically would meet the requirement for being an incorporated group eligible to receive funding for a project. However, in Rule 653-2-2, which are the board guidelines, the board appears to have outlined additional factors it wishes to consider when determining whether or not a project is in the public interest. In particular, those guidelines state that the board will not fund a project sponsored by individuals or families. In this case, even though the project is being sponsored by an LLC, it is a closely held LLC completely owned by members of the same family. From the description of the project, it also looks like the family will be the only ones who will benefit from the project. In my opinion, this project would fall under R 653-2-2 1B IV and is one the board has indicated it will not fund. I don't believe that the family incorporating as an LLC changes that determination. So that is our attorney's opinion. The other concern we had before we even considered this was that the company wanted to act as their own contractor on this project. The board's guidelines indicate that they expect a competitive bid process for construction. Although a company can act as its own contractor for small projects, but this is not a small project. So we are uncomfortable with this application, and considering the AG's opinion now, I believe we will send a letter to the company stating that the board will not consider their application based on their guidelines to not fund family projects.
Blaine?
I've got a question for you, Tom. You mentioned last time that you had made a specific list of additional information that you needed from them, that their application still left a lot of information gaps, if you will. Since our last meeting, when you mentioned you were still waiting on additional information, did you receive any additional information from them?
No, I have not. There was a question even about their cost estimate that they put in their application, because they listed basically a $10.2 million project there, which included the new dam, pipeline, and a small hydroelectric plant. And their engineer's cost estimate just off for the dam alone was $10.9 million. So I'd asked them for clarification on their cost estimate. There's really no documented information on the spring flow which would feed the project, so I'd asked them more information about that. And I brought up the fact, and we had discussed this when Blaine and Spencer and I met with them, that the board may not agree with them building the project. So in that request for more information, I asked them specifically if the board would not let them build the project, if they could proceed with funding instead of just a $5 million request, closer to a $10 million funding request. And those are some of the information that I did not receive back. So also our staff geologist kind of gathered some information around for the site itself, and it's a lot of volcanic rock, and there's supposedly a lot of spring water that comes out of the area, but you don't see it on the surface. So the fear is that there's a lot of fracturing in that rock, and even if they build the dam, the reservoir site would not hold the water. So there's just a lot of questions that need to be answered, even if the board decides to go ahead with the feasibility report. So.
Go ahead, Spencer.
I just, I appreciate Blaine and Tom going out here for our site visit on this. I just want to make it really clear on my side that I'm trying to kind of take a back seat on this. I've got a conflict of interest. I'm on a board of a water conservancy district, on a city water board, and some other hats, and there's some litigation and so forth involved. So I'm going to completely remove myself, and so if there is any vote or anything like that, I will abstain. So.
I'll just say, based on report from staff, it seems like there is legal issues potentially that arise, and that gives me a great deal of pause. It seems prudent that we don't proceed on that one.
Mr. Chairman, it isn't identical to another case that Russell Hadley and I were involved with, but there was a application to the board from a group on the Box Elder Cache County line at Petersboro Beaver Dam, and when we found that the water rights were held by an individual and not a company, that I think Russell guided me to say that, no, we can't do this kind of a project because of the individual was going to benefit from it directly.
Okay. Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I appreciate the discussion that we've had relative to that, and I sent an email, I think, to all of us as reviewed the minutes, indicating that this was going to have a understanding that based on the minutes, there was going to be further discussion, which we've had, and so I appreciate that information being brought forward to help clarify, the situation. I just wanted to draw the distinction between, and correct me if I may very well be wrong, Liz has done her due diligence in researching the law and the guidelines relative to it being her opinion as an attorney within the Attorney General's office, but I don't think it's an official opinion unless it's written on official Attorney General letterhead. So I don't know whether we need to proceed with caution relative to that being represented. I don't know. I just raised that as a question.
Well, if I might, I believe her writing it down makes it official. She mentioned to me that if we need something more official, we can do that. I let her know that I thought her email was sufficient to pass along to the board. We didn't put it in the board folder or anything. I'll just mention this project has not had any motion, any action by the board yet. That was kind of where this started. Is it even worth pursuing? And with the Attorney General's opinion, I am of the opinion that we can simply let them know that their application does not meet the board guidelines and will not be considered. If there are differing opinions to that, we can go forward with our feasibility report, just knowing that ultimately staff may come to the conclusion that their recommendation is the board doesn't fund the project. It doesn't often happen, but it on a rare occasion it might, so we can pursue it.
And I appreciate that. I'm not trying to muddy the water. I'm just, reflecting back on a former life where it was represented to us when we referenced Attorney General's opinions, that unless it was on an official Attorney General letterhead,
okay,
then it was, and I'm not saying that, one way or the other. I think this will suffice, but if push came to shove, are we on solid ground?
And maybe the way to approach this is to, I think I personally agree, And if you have that ability to, from a staff standpoint, to then reject the application based on that, just ask the Attorney General's office for a written
Yes.
Yeah.
thing for the
And
file.
that's-
and then
that's
we
the
have it
thought
on
I just-
file.
Yeah, that's
But
the
go
thought I
ahead,
had
Go that way.
as you were speaking, is that
Was there somebody else that had a?
with our rejection, we can do that.
I just think to protect us that you need that from the Attorney General, not just an email, but an official letter stating the facts, and so that when you reject or as you finish through or however you proceed, why it's covered and the bases are covered.
And then we'll have something official for the file as well.
Yes. That would be my advice.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other concerns?
Great, thank you. We have all these discussion points today, so one more that we wanted to chat about is, how did Director Ferry state this to me? You know, when one has the money, one can make the rules type of thing, and the Board of Water Resources is, has 3 different loan funds, and you do have board guidelines. But one of the questions that we wanted to have with you, and I did speak to Julia a little, Chair Tenner, before this meeting, is the potential for us, if the board is willing, to reevaluate the board's rules to try and enhance water conservation practices for projects that come before the board. So maybe I didn't explain that quite right, but really trying to, if you guys are loaning or purchasing projects and using your loan funds to help build projects, that water conservation practices are being implemented on the ground to enhance them. Like, we already require a water conservation plan, but there were some concerns with a previous project that went through that the people who got the funds from the board felt like they didn't need to conserve any more water because now they have all this water. So how do we balance those things? So that's kind of the discussion that we wanted to have. Shalane, anything to add right off?
Yeah, I have a couple other things I wanted to add. So first off, I have to remind everyone of this every once in a while. We use the word loan a lot just because it's easy. But most of the time, the board doesn't make loans. The board builds projects, and the local sponsors buy them back, or they enter into bonds. And for those projects that you purchase, you then own the project and the associated water rights until they are purchased back. So there is inherent reasons for you to want the best for the state with these projects. On the board guidelines and rules part of it, there's been actually several things that have come up in the recent past. One is this project who seemed to then go contrary to their other local water providers, going, well, now we can develop our own water. We don't have to consider what you want us to do. But there are also several other things. It's been almost 4 years since the board updated their guidelines, looked at these rules, and decided if they're still appropriate. There have been other studies, other reports come out since then about things like the not watering between 10 and 6 and all of that, is if that's still really the most appropriate measure to enact, or if it should be just considered on a project basis. So I actually have a handout I've printed out the board guidelines for you all. It's such a fun read. I'm not asking you to do anything today, but I would like you all to take it home and read through them, and let me know if you think there are some things that we might want to consider updating, if there are things that could be changed. I will say, when it comes to the water conservation and management plans, they're required to submit those and have them approved by our conservation section in our office, but maybe you all want to come up with some guidelines for them to consider when they're critiquing or reviewing these plans, or maybe you'd just like to know exactly what the conservation section is looking for as they review them. And maybe that's something we need to add into those board guidelines, that these are the criteria expected to be met, because they are different depending on the provider and the project. So we'd like you to look at those, maybe chat with you. I don't know if you're ready to discuss this today, but if this is something you'd like to have further discussion on in the future, you don't have more ARPA funds to hand out at this point. You might in the future, but for now, things are getting back a little more to normal. So maybe this is a good time to look at these guidelines and see if there's anything the board thinks needs to be updated or changed.
I think that seems prudent. I mean, I think that the last 4 years we've seen a lot of changes in water generally in the state and water concerns. And I think that it's probably prudent for us to look at how we're doing business.
I would agree with that, but I would also want to have them and have some time to chew on them and not do anything today.
Yes, that was not our intention to put you on the spot, but just to start the discussion, and grateful that Shalane printed those out.
Prepared.
Were you an A student, Shalane?
I think I'm the youngest one on the board here by a few years, and I'm having to strain a little bit.
We can reprint it. Shalane, maybe we should reprint it with a little bigger font.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick comment. You know, and I need to read through this, and it sounds like a good idea, but I can think of certain situations where safety becomes a big part of a project in the irrigation world anyway, and I recall just when I was a new board member on this board and the Jordan Northern failed in Salt Lake County, and holy cow, man, we weren't looking for water conservation, we were looking to save people's lives, more or less, financial lives anyway, but sometimes you deal with each project on its own merits and go from there. So appreciate the information, and I'll study it.
Anything
Any
else?
questions for me? Or I'll get you a better copy at lunch.
Okay, we just had two other quick items. One is on the exemption process and status for secondary metering. Marisa, are you prepared to?
There's a lot of places I could go with this. How much time do you want? So all of the money has been authorized and committed. All of it has been committed from the ARPA funds. We do have right now about $9 million that is in limbo because they are systems that we know are interested in the current exemption options, and they're working with water rights. And we've met with water rights a few times because their urgency is to figure things out not until 2030, because that's the main exemption is subsection 13 is, you know, the penalties hit in 2030. So we've blessed their hearts. We've talked to them a couple of times, and they're trying to hurry and flip around those applications they have received from those that are interested in applying. I believe those that we know that are interested still may not have applied yet for those exemptions. And then, do you want me to discuss the potential of the changes in the? Okay. So there's two changes. One change through Representative Snyder is saying that there's three options that go through the Division of Water Rights that you could be exempt. Only one of those was called out in 73-10-34.5 as saying if you're exempt under this one, you can use the ARPA funds for an alternative project. I'm going to paraphrase this, that will conserve more water than metering at individual connections to the satisfaction of the Board of Water Resources. So, so he wants that, the change he's making is all three of those exemptions could have that possibility, which then opens it up to even more. It doesn't open up for more to be exempt. It opens up more to say, oh, we're exempt and we want to use the money for something else, which we had not anticipated. So we're trying to figure out where that's going to go. The other one is Senator Hinkins. So there's two bills. He's looking at 73-10-34. That's the meat of secondary metering. The 34.5 is about the ARPA funding and other funding. But talking about changing that same exemption that's 1,000 connections or less, not meters, 1,000 secondary connections or less to 2,500 or less. And Senator Hinkins mentioned that it will affect two systems to go from 1,000 to 2,500. Based on the information we have of who has applied for funding from us, and Joel may have some more information, just those that have applied to funding for us, it changes it to 13 systems that could now possibly go exempt, us not knowing if they will or not knowing also if they really could be. We just know potentially because of the connection number, but there is another thing that has to be part of it. And then we don't know if they will. And not 10 of those actually, it was 9, but Mountain View, I believe, is up in Plain City, and I didn't mark it. 10 of those fall in the Great Salt Lake Basin. So I know that's big and a big concern with Senator Sandel. It's been a big concern of, those in the Great Salt Lake Basin. So we've had a few different discussions after and during meetings about how to handle this from our standpoint, that those additional systems could jump us from 9 million to potentially 30 million in limbo. And no one else is asking for the money except for those larger systems that have already maxed out. Or they maxed out in one pot, they're not maxed out in the other pot. So because of that $10 million limit that is in there. So there's been a lot of different discussions. Can we increase the limit? Are we really going to go to 2,500 connections? Even Senator Hinkinson when he was talking about it, said the number could be 1,500, it could be 2,000. We're not sure why he chose 2,500. So, but it's a lot of money. Those 13 systems represent. They're probably about probably about 2.5 million average that they each have of the board's money, and we're past that January 1st deadline, and so the board set.
Yeah, thanks.
So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we have started the conversations of if this is really what the legislature wants to do, is there the potential to raise the cap as well? Because right now, the companies, the entities that could probably use the most money and get it in the ground quickly and still meet the deadlines are all capped out. So that's another kind of option that we're looking at if this goes forward.
And it gets a little tricky, if I may. There's about 9 million. I don't know if you remember when they came back for a second amount of money. Roy and Weber Basin, and their request was 67 million, and we only had 41 million available. And it's the second pot. So if we get 9 million back, we could use that 9 million to supplement some of that. But if the cap is not increased, that's the most we could use. And then if we've got this other pot that starts coming back to us, I know that there's 5 million that, no, that one we already know about, sorry. There's lots of pots and spreadsheets.
Well, yeah, I read the article in the paper on Senate Bill 125, which is Senator Hinkins' bill, and I, had a number of questions as I, walked down through that. And I think it was Joel referenced that there were, and you've just already reiterated that, 13 of those projects fall within the Great Salt Lake drainage area.
Not 10.
10, okay.
It would affect 13 more systems that have applied for funding.
Okay. And so I had the question, how much money is that? You've kind of answered that. Could the money be committed as per the ARPA requirements by 2024? We're in 2024, so we have,
That's what we're
roughly
We're worried
11
about.
months, to do that. And then with the existing projects that are out there that are moving forward, I know they're, part of their concern and delay in getting the existing projects implemented with supply chain issues, and have those supply chain issues been resolved, or are they still facing some of those concerns out there with being able to, continue to meet the requirements of getting them installed within the timeframes?
Kind of looked at Tom a little bit because he's got a couple of those really big systems under his, You want to come back up, Tom? He's more boots on the ground about that. He's got Lehigh and Davis Weber County's Canal Company.
And then I just had the basic question, are we being, if we're concerned about conserving water, are we being a little bit hypocritical about exempting some of these and not, conserving water, when there was a big push a couple of years ago to do that, and now we're coming back and saying, well, maybe. So those are just some questions.
As far as the supply chain goes, at least on mine, Lehigh City was the very first application the board received, and they were kind of proactive, so they don't seem to be having a supply issue.
Okay.
But they may be part of the reason there is a supply issue for the others.
Because they beat everybody else to the punch.
I know Weber Basin, they're the ones that are ordering the meters themselves, and so they seem to be getting them in, and they're trickling out to the other organizations. But as far as the water meter pits, the covers, the radios, they seem to be backed up a bit, and that's even for the large ones. I know a lot of the smaller organizations like Heber City, they've ordered their parts and they're waiting for them to come in. Canal Irrigation Company, the same situation. They've ordered those and expecting them to come in. So, yeah, in some of them there doesn't seem to be a problem, but overall over the state there seems to still be a backlog.
And Mr. Vice Chair, if I can add to that, some are putting in the pits and getting stuff ready, waiting for the parts, which then means they're going back to these houses twice. I don't know, backyards, front yards. It's making it difficult for them that, if they've got a contractor, if they, or even if their own staff, they're really trying to, they're trying their best to try to figure out how to get these in the ground as fast as they can.
Do we have any knowledge on how many of the 13 have actually started construction or started implementation? Yeah, I know that we had, I think, was it 11 that were under current bid, right?
Okay.
That we've already approved. Do we have any idea that if they've actually started anything? I'm trying to gauge how likely it is they're going to come back and say, yeah, we're no longer interested. Here's your money back.
We have one that has started and has already told us if this change happens this session, we'll change our mind.
Okay.
So they've already gotten some. Now, just because they're under contract with us doesn't mean they have to use the money.
Yep. I get
That,
that.
yeah. Let me pull this up real quick and see if I can. Yeah. Yeah. Google Sheets is fantastic. So, so we have got, I wrote that we have 2 that have received reimbursement. I have no idea if they will try to go exempt. This is for the now going up to 2,500. I have no idea. Is that one yours? Okay. They are under contract. One has received about $400,000 in reimbursement through the grant, and the other one is $300,000 through the grant.
South Weaver is. Yeah, they're well under construction. They won't.
Yeah. Okay, so one of them, he said they won't pull out, so that's good to hear. So that's $2.5 million that isn't going to come back at us, so that's nice to hear. The other one has $2 million. I don't know that they'll not go. It's Mountain View Irrigation Company.
So it sounds like the vast majority of that 30 million though could potentially be.
It's hard to know. Some of them are cities. So the second part to this exemption is under 1,000 connections, or what will be under a different number, and a combination of open ditches and pipelines, which is kind of odd when you're talking about a pressurized system. So we have had concerns. Does this mean they think, because we know some of these also have ag, do they think they can then use the money for ag? So Joel's done a really good job in the legislative sessions to go up and make a comment, this cannot be used for ag. And again, they have to tell us, yeah, okay, sorry, I'm getting everything mixed up. But
Well, it was mentioned that the monies could be used for something else.
an alternative project that'll conserve more water than metering at individual connections.
And do we know what those types of projects may or may not be?
No, we have no idea.
We haven't even,
And they'd have to come back before the board for the board's approval.
and we have a December
Yes.
31st.
And a typical
2024 deadline.
project takes 4 to 6 months to get under contract. So one of the reasons we're looking at asking about lifting the cap of the 10 million is we have 7 systems that would love and can use. And yeah, they're the big guys, but no one else is asking for the money. They're not asking to go exempt. And we already have their applications asking for the up to 10 million. And so we've already shorted them once. But they know our system, they know how this works, and we know them already. So it could be an easy flip. The very difficult thing that you asked about, Kyle, is so then someone tells us, oh, we're going to convert and use some of the funds, but not all of the funds. And then we say, okay, we have to have plans and specs. And if they don't have them, and it gets very tricky, which is why we set the January 1st deadline, which I'll be honest, I have not been a good steward of your January 1st deadline. I've been worried about other thing, yeah.
Well, I would
Candace
say
getting phone calls.
It's been challenging with these changes to, hold people to that and then not know what the legislature is going to do.
And then Candace gets phone calls.
Yeah.
About it. When I say mean things, Candace then gets a phone call from someone else.
Any questions about that? Any additional questions or thoughts? Okay, we are running short on time and I want to get you to lunch. We have here for you a list of all the bills that we are tracking and keeping track of. The ones highlighted in blue probably impact water resources the most. And I would say, we've talked about a couple of them already. The big one that impacts the board and the board funding process the most is Representative Snyder's HB 280, water-related changes. This bill drastically changes how water infrastructure projects could potentially be funded or planned for in the future. Representative Snyder, we have met with him several times. And his idea is that we would create some sort of unified water infrastructure plan in conjunction with the other water funding agencies. So think the board, Drinking Water Board, Wastewater Quality Board, CIB, to come up with a plan similar to what transportation does. Every 4 years, they come up with the Unified Transportation Infrastructure Plan, where they have a prioritized list of projects that they intend to do over the next 30 to 20 years, or 20 to 30 years in 10-year time frames. And so this is something we have been watching very closely, talking with Representative Snyder, trying to influence the process as much as possible. You know, so I was presenting at the Rural Water Legislative Rally on Tuesday, and they were like, well, what do you think of this bill? And I was like, well, the devil's in the details, right? Like how we actually administer this could really change the way things are done. In addition to the way it changes how we would plan for water infrastructure projects and the financing of them, it also requires the board, and we're of course staff to the board, so we would help you do this, but to do a study on charging a fee for infrastructure to water providers, water suppliers, for each end user. So some sort of fee that would go on a water bill, then the state would collect, and the board and the other water boards would distribute out. That has been probably the most heated conversation. So not only is this study done by the board, but then in 2 years' time, it will be implemented. So it's not like we're going to study it and come back to the legislature. This code authorized the board to study it and then implement it starting in 2027. And so there's been a lot of concerns about that. So this is the one we're probably watching the closest and trying to work through. Currently we have edits into Representative Snyder trying to adjust the timing, because some of the deadlines associated with this planning process, in my opinion, are really a little unrealistic for us to do in the time frame. For example, we're supposed to have an agency plan for all of the infrastructure projects that might come before the board by June 30th of this year. So there's some concerns with the timing of it. But happy to take questions on that.
Well, just my first thought is, I appreciate that transportation does that, but they own all the roads. Yeah. And we don't own any of these systems, except for the period of time that we may have a lien against them for a project we do, but we don't pull those triggers of when they do them. So in my mind, I'm trying to think of how this is even feasible. We may know some of the larger projects that have been coming down the tube at us, but as far as these smaller projects, which I feel are incredibly critical to these small communities and other things to help people, it's just as critical to me as a Deer Creek project that feeds so much of the Wasatch Front. I'm not sure how that fits all in, or even the capability of your staff to even project something like that. Seems, I'm not seeing outside this box very well.
It's one of our concerns as well of how we would actually go about this. I mean, if we're thinking big picture, we have worked with the Water Conservancy districts over the years to collect water infrastructure data to be part of the state water infrastructure plan. That kind of is a high-level look of the infrastructure needs out to 2060. The wastewater guys have done that on the wastewater end as well, where we have a gaping hole. So, I mean, and I'm saying that's a high level, so we need more detailed analysis there, but where we have a gaping hole is the needs in agriculture, in irrigation companies, all the canals, like all of that. It will take time to get and then to be able to prioritize it, understanding that none of us own those projects. We would just be sending out requests, send us your projects so we can rank and prioritize them. But there are a lot of concerns with how this would be done. And then do we only have one application period a year? that we rank and the board can rank and prioritize, or how does that work, right? There is 2 exemptions from the prioritization process. One being an emergency project, so a project that, you know, we got to address right away. That doesn't have to go through the prioritization project, or quote unquote a small project, which would be defined through rules. But, you know, we initially kind of came up with maybe it's under $1 million, but we would define
An
that through
emergency
rules.
project could be tens of millions or hundreds, and you've already committed funds based on priorities of projects you're not even sure are gonna happen, because they're not yours. That's a problematic for me, but.
It is not simple, and this would make it a little bit more complicated for sure. Okay.
So what kind of footing or support is there in the legislature for this, or is it a little premature to tell that?
There are a lot of concerns in the water community about this bill. That being said, my understanding is that there is leadership support for the bill. So just trying to quote Casey or Representative Snyder from the last task force meeting where he presented this bill, he made it sound like it was gonna get passed, so let's get it right. So let's make the changes we need to make to it.
Okay.
I watched the task force meeting, and that was how I interpreted his position.
He said
That
it's
the
gonna
Water
happen.
Development Commission had
He said it's gonna
adopted it,
happen.
and nobody else matters.
Yep. Yeah, he said it's his way or the highway, but his way is the highway and it's gonna go down it, basically.
Yeah. So we're about 12 o'clock, Mr. Vice Chair. I can go through a couple of additional bills in my director's report, and I can give an update in the director's report on the Great Salt Lake litigation as well. But I think at this point it'd be prudent to go break for lunch, and then we'll have the board meeting start up at 1.
That sounds good. If everybody's in agreement, let's adjourn.
So moved. Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Perfect.